The morning fog still clung to the village when the sound of boots began echoing through the narrow cobblestone streets. It wasn't the sound of running or shouting, just the steady rhythm of an army's presence, heavy and practiced. Houses stood with their shutters half closed, doors barely open, as though afraid to breathe too loudly. The smell of rain mixed with the faint scent of wood smoke and fear, the kind that had settled into every corner since the uniforms came. From the small attic window of an old bakery, a girl watched quietly, her hands smudged with charcoal, her eyes sharp and still. Her name was Elodie, and she was 12 years old, though her gaze had long since learned to stop looking like a child's. Her sketchbook lay open on the table, the page filled with quick strokes and soft lines, the shape of a man's face forming beneath her fingers. She wasn't drawing for fun anymore. She was drawing for food. The soldiers didn't pay much attention to her at first. She was just a small girl with a pencil and paper, sitting by the fountain or near the square, offering to draw portraits for anyone who passed. They liked her drawings, though. The men in gray coats who guarded the corners and the old bridge would sometimes stop and let her sketch their faces, leaving her with a piece of bread or a coin if they were generous. She smiled when they did, because smiling kept her invisible. Smiling was safer than silence. Her mother didn't like it. "You shouldn't be near them, Elodie," she whispered one evening, her voice shaking as she stirred a thin pot of soup that barely filled the bowl. "If they see you too often, they'll think you're one of them. Or worse, they'll think you're against them." "I'm neither," the girl said softly. "I just draw what I see." Her mother sighed. "And what do you see?" Elodie looked toward the window where the faint glow of lamps painted the street below. "I see people who forgot they were people." Her father had been taken 2 years before, the night the trucks came to the village. They said he was being questioned for helping someone cross the fields after curfew. He never came back. Her mother never said his name out loud anymore, as if keeping it unspoken could protect them from being next. But Elodie drew him sometimes, in the quiet hours of dawn, from the memory of his hands fixing the bakery oven, from the sound of his laughter echoing in the small kitchen. She drew him smiling, alive, because it was the only way to make it feel true again. Then one afternoon, while sitting near the old fountain sketching the outline of a young soldier's jaw, she noticed something small but strange. A reflection, not of the soldier's face, but of the road behind him. In the glassy surface of the fountain water, she could see 3 other soldiers unloading crates near the church, marking something on a paper map, pointing at a hill to the west. She looked down quickly, pretending not to notice, but her mind captured the image faster than her hand could move. When she got home that night, she redrew it exactly from memory, the church, the crates, the hill. She didn't know what it meant, only that the men who whispered behind the bakery every few nights might want to know. The next morning she left the drawing folded beneath a loose brick near the back door, where a man with a wool coat and tired eyes sometimes came when no one was looking. That night, when she returned, the paper was gone. 2 days later, a supply truck never reached the hill west of town. That was how it began. After that, Elodie drew more than faces. She drew corners of streets, fences, barns, and the places where soldiers stood guard. She memorized everything without meaning to, the shape of their coats, the sound of their laughter, the way their leader checked his watch every afternoon at the same time. Her sketches became messages hidden in plain sight, lines of pencil that looked like art but whispered of movements and maps. But she never told her mother. She couldn't. Her mother's eyes had already learned too much fear. One evening, as rain started tapping against the roof, a knock came at the door. Elodie froze. Her mother's hand trembled as she lifted the latch. A young man in a brown cap stood there, soaked from the storm, his voice low and urgent. "Madam," he said, glancing past her toward the kitchen, "we were told the girl who draws soldiers' lives here." Her mother hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Elodie, who stood motionless by the table. "She draws pictures, yes, but nothing more." The man smiled faintly. "I think she draws more than that." Tell her thank you. The hill was empty when they came. You saved lives, little one. Elodie didn't answer. She didn't even breathe. He handed her a small loaf of bread wrapped in paper. For the artist, he said, then vanished back into the rain. After he left, her mother said nothing for a long time. She just stared at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Then she whispered, "You're going to get us both killed." Elodie didn't reply. She sat down, unwrapped the bread, and tore it in half. One piece for her mother, one for herself. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing the sound of boots again, somewhere far off, mixed with thunder. In her mind, she saw faces, soldiers she had drawn, men laughing at her sketches, men who might never come back. She wondered if they had families, if they wrote letters home, if anyone would remember them once their uniforms were gone. And she wondered what she was becoming. A spy? A child playing a dangerous game? Or just an artist who wanted to see something beautiful survive this endless gray world? A week later, the square was filled with trucks again. A new commander had arrived. He was taller, younger than the others, his uniform pressed, his boots spotless. He carried no smile. When he saw Elodie sitting by the fountain, sketching quietly as she always did, he stopped. "You," he said in a clipped accent, "you are the girl who draws." "Yes, sir," she replied, trying to sound small, harmless. He leaned closer, his shadow covering the page. "Draw me." Her fingers shook as she nodded. The soldiers nearby laughed softly, watching her. She drew his face carefully, the hard lines, the sharp jaw, the cold eyes that seemed to never blink. But beneath the helmet, she added something small, almost invisible, only a few lines, but to those who knew how to look, it meant everything. A mark on the right side of his coat, shaped like a slanted cross near his badge. It was a code, the sign she used for those who needed to see. When she handed him the sketch, he smiled for the first time, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You are talented," he said. "Keep drawing. But remember, sometimes art can be dangerous." She nodded, her throat dry. He walked away, leaving muddy footprints that looked like stains across the stone. That night, she buried her sketchbook under the floorboards. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. For the first time, she wished she had never picked up a pencil. The rain did not stop for 3 days. The streets of the village turned into small rivers of mud, carrying broken twigs and bits of paper toward the drains. People moved quietly beneath umbrellas or stayed hidden behind closed shutters. The soldiers, however, never stopped patrolling. Their boots splashed through puddles, their coats heavy with water, their voices echoing faintly through the mist. Elodie stayed indoors, her fingers tracing the edges of the floorboard beneath which her sketchbook was hidden. Every sound outside made her heart tighten. She could still hear the commander's voice in her mind, calm but cold, warning her that art could be dangerous. He had seen something in her eyes, she was sure of it. Maybe not enough to accuse her, but enough to remember her face. Her mother had grown quieter since that day. She didn't scold or question her anymore. She only looked at her sometimes as if memorizing her features, as though afraid one morning she might wake up and Elodie would be gone. On the 4th morning, the sun returned, pale and thin, cutting through the mist like a blade. Elodie slipped out early, pretending to go to the bakery to fetch stale bread. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. When she reached the square, she saw that the fountain had overflowed, its water murky and cold. The commander stood near the church with his men, speaking to an officer. She avoided their eyes and hurried toward the back alley where the brick behind the bakery waited. There was no paper hidden there. Only a small stone placed where her drawing should have been. That was the signal. It meant the message had been received, and there was another one waiting. Her pulse quickened as she looked around, then turned toward the butcher's lane where a faded poster flapped loosely against the wall. She peeled it back slightly, pretending to look for coins on the ground, and there it was, another folded note. Inside, the handwriting was hurried and rough. The bridge to the east. They're guarding something under it. Sketch everything. You'll be watched. Be careful. She read it twice, then tore it into tiny pieces and let the wind carry them into the gutter. That afternoon, she sat near the riverbank with her sketchbook on her lap, pretending to draw the water. A group of soldiers were stationed near the old bridge, standing beside a covered truck. One of them smoked while the others rolled barrels toward the water's edge. She drew quickly, each line a part of the scene, the shape of the bridge, the slope of the land, the crates stacked in a specific pattern. Her hands moved as though she were simply an artist capturing a peaceful day, but her mind recorded every detail. Suddenly, one of the men turned, his eyes landing on her. She froze. He said something to the others and began walking toward her. Elodie's throat went dry. She closed her sketchbook slowly, stood, and forced a small smile. "Little artist," the soldier said in a heavy accent, "you like to draw bridges?" "Yes, sir," she replied softly. "They are beautiful. They don't move." He chuckled, his boots sinking slightly into the mud. "Nothing is beautiful now, not even bridges." He leaned closer, glancing at the book under her arm. "May I see?" She hesitated, then opened to a different page, a portrait of a stray cat near the bakery. The soldier's expression softened slightly. "You have talent. You make sad things look gentle." He handed the book back and nodded toward the village. "Go home before the rain comes again." She walked away quickly, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. When she reached the corner, she looked back once. The soldier was still watching her. That night, she slipped the page with the bridge drawing beneath the same loose brick. By dawn, it was gone again. Days passed in silence. Then one evening, explosions shook the hills east of the village. The bridge had collapsed into the river, and the soldiers were shouting orders through the smoke. Her mother pulled her away from the window, trembling. "Elodie, what have you done?" Before she could answer, there was a knock at the door. Hard, sharp, relentless. Her mother went pale. Elodie's heart dropped. When the door opened, two soldiers stood outside, their coats wet, their faces blank. Between them was the commander. "The girl who draws," he said calmly, "come with us." Her mother tried to step forward. "She is a child. She has done nothing." He raised a hand. "It is only a question. We need her to draw something for us." Elodie's stomach turned, but she nodded and followed. The rain had started again, cold needles falling from the sky. They led her through the square, past the bakery, past the fountain where her drawings once brought smiles. She noticed the faces watching from behind curtains, afraid to be seen but unable to look away. Inside the church, long tables had been set up. Maps were spread across them. Lamps flickered, casting yellow light on weary faces. The commander gestured for her to sit. "You are good with details," he said. "We have lost a bridge east of here. We believe locals helped. You have seen faces in the village, yes?" Her fingers trembled. "Yes, sir." "Good," he said, placing paper and pencil before her. "Draw the faces of men who do not belong. Anyone suspicious. Anyone new." Her mind screamed to run, but her body stayed still. She nodded and began to draw. She sketched shapes that meant nothing, faces of strangers she had once seen at the market or passing by. She worked slowly, making sure none resembled the people she had helped. The commander studied her as she drew. "You are calm," he said. "That is rare for one so young." "I have learned," she murmured. When she finished, he took the paper and looked at it for a long time. Then he smiled faintly. "Very good. You may go." Her legs felt weak as she stood. As she turned toward the door, he spoke again. "Elodie," he said quietly, "art tells the truth, even when people lie. I will know if you have hidden anything." Outside, the rain had stopped. She ran all the way home. Her mother was waiting by the window. When she saw her, she broke down in tears, clutching her tightly. "They will come again," she whispered. "They know something. You must stop." But Elodie couldn't stop. She had seen too much. Too many faces, too much fear, too many quiet acts of kindness hidden in a world gone dark. That night, she sat awake, staring at the ceiling. The commander's words echoed in her head. "Art tells the truth." He was right. But truth was not always what people wanted to see. A week later, soldiers began searching houses. They said they were looking for traitors. Every knock on a door made the village flinch. The baker disappeared one night. The man in the wool coat who once took her drawings was gone too. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Elodie went back to the fountain. She sat there with her sketchbook open to a blank page. The commander passed by on horseback. He stopped, looking down at her. "You still draw?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "For who?" "For whoever remembers," she answered. He studied her for a long moment, then rode away without a word. When darkness fell, she drew again. Not soldiers, not bridges, not the faces of enemies or friends, just the village itself. The houses, the bakery, the church, the fountain. She drew it as it had once been, before the trucks, before the rain, before fear became a language everyone spoke. Tears blurred the lines on the page. She didn't wipe them away. As she finished, she heard footsteps behind her. A whisper. "Elodie." She turned and saw the young man with the brown cap from before, his face pale and tired. "You must leave," he said. "They're coming for everyone who spoke to the soldiers too often. They think you pass messages." "I can't," she said. "My mother. She will be safe if you go now. Take the road through the fields. There's a barn 2 miles out. Someone will meet you." She hesitated, looking back toward her home, the small window glowing faintly in the distance. Then she closed her sketchbook, clutching it to her chest. "If they take it, they take everything." He nodded. "Then don't let them." She ran through the night, the cold air burning her lungs, the sky heavy with clouds. Behind her, faint echoes of shouting drifted through the wind. She didn't look back. When she reached the barn, a lantern flickered inside. A woman stood there, her face hidden beneath a scarf. "You must be the artist," she said softly. "We've heard of your drawings. They've saved more than you know." Elodie didn't speak. She just opened her book, showing her pages one by one, the bridge, the church, the fountain, the faces of soldiers, and finally the village itself. The woman smiled sadly. "Keep drawing," she whispered. "The world will need to remember." Outside, thunder rumbled again. Elodie sat by the barn wall, clutching her book. For the first time in months, she felt both fear and hope living side by side. She didn't know if she would ever see her mother again, or her village, or the fountain where her drawings once lived. But she knew one thing, the pencil in her hand was stronger than she had ever realized. And as the storm rolled over the fields, she began to draw once more. The barn smelled of hay and smoke and damp wood, but to Elodie it felt like safety for the first time in months. The woman with the scarf gave her a wool blanket and a piece of bread, and as she ate, she watched the lantern's flame tremble each time the wind pressed against the wooden walls. Outside, the rain had stopped. The fields were dark and quiet except for the distant hum of trucks far away. When morning came, light filtered through the cracks in the boards, painting thin golden lines across her sketchbook. She hadn't slept much. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, the glow of their kitchen window, the sound of boots approaching the door. She imagined her mother waking to find her gone, wondering if she had been taken. The woman returned carrying a small satchel. "We can't stay long," she said. "Patrols will reach the outskirts by noon." "Where will we go?" Elodie asked. "South," the woman said. "There's a farmhouse hidden near the woods. Others are there, people like you. People like her." Elodie didn't know what that meant anymore. Was she an artist? A messenger? A fugitive? The lines had all blurred. They set off as the sky turned pale gray. The road was muddy, the air sharp and wet. Every sound made Elodie's heart race, a crow calling from a tree, the creak of cart wheels far off, the echo of thunder behind the hills. The woman walked quickly, her steps quiet and sure, glancing back every few minutes to make sure Elodie kept up. By midday, they reached the woods. The trees stood tall and thin, their branches bare and blackened by the season. The wind whistled through them, carrying the faint scent of pine and smoke. They followed a narrow path until they came upon the farmhouse. It looked abandoned at first, broken shutters, a collapsed fence, smoke rising only faintly from the chimney. But when the woman knocked twice on the door, it opened, revealing 3 people inside. A man with a bandaged arm, a woman holding a baby, and another man who looked barely older than a boy. They all looked tired, thin, but their eyes held something Elodie hadn't seen in a long time: hope. "She's the girl I told you about," the woman said. "The one who draws." The man with the bandage nodded slowly. "Then you've done more for us than you know." He motioned for her to sit near the fire. "The sketches you left behind, they saved entire groups from capture. You saw things no one else could. You noticed the details that others missed." Elodie stared at the fire, the warmth stinging her cold fingers. "I didn't do it to be brave," she said quietly. "I just wanted to draw." "That's what bravery often looks like," the man said. That night, as the others slept, Elodie sat near the small window and opened her sketchbook again. The pages were wrinkled, some smudged with rain, but the drawings were still clear. The faces, the streets, the fountain, they were pieces of a world that might never exist again. She thought of the commander's words, "Art tells the truth," and wondered what truths these pages would hold years from now. She began a new drawing, this time of the farmhouse, the broken fence, the people huddled around the fire. But as she sketched, she heard a noise outside. A faint crack. Then another. Not thunder. Not wind. Gunfire. The woman with the scarf rushed to the window. "They found us," she whispered. The man grabbed his rifle, the younger one too, their faces tense but not surprised. "There's a path through the orchard," the man said. "Take the girl and go." Elodie clutched her sketchbook. "I can help," she said, her voice shaking. The woman turned sharply. "No. You run. That's how you help now." The door burst open before she could answer. Shouts filled the air, the sound of boots and orders. The man fired once, then twice. Chaos swallowed everything. The woman pulled Elodie by the arm, dragging her through a back door into the orchard where apple trees stood twisted and bare. Bullets cracked through branches. The air was filled with smoke and the sharp smell of gunpowder. They ran until the ground sloped downward into a narrow stream. The woman stumbled, hit by something, and fell hard against the earth. Elodie dropped to her knees beside her. "Go," the woman gasped, blood darkening her sleeve. "Go now." "I can't leave you," Elodie whispered. The woman smiled faintly, her eyes soft despite the pain. "Then remember me. Draw me." Her voice faded with the wind. Elodie pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from crying out. She could hear shouting behind her, dogs barking, boots crashing through the brush. She ran again, clutching the sketchbook so tightly her fingers hurt. She didn't know where she was going, only away, always away. When night fell, she reached the edge of the woods and collapsed beneath a tree. The world was silent except for her breathing. She opened her sketchbook with shaking hands. On a blank page, in the dim light of the moon, she began to draw the woman's face, the calm eyes, the gentle lines of her mouth, the scarf that had fluttered in the wind. Tears fell onto the page, blurring the charcoal, but she didn't stop. She kept drawing until her hands went numb. She stayed hidden for days, moving at dawn, resting at dusk, stealing sips of water from the stream and bits of fruit left on trees. The countryside stretched endlessly, scarred by craters and silence. Once, she passed a burned-out village, its church collapsed, its streets empty. She didn't stop there. One morning, she saw smoke rising in the distance, not from fires, but from chimneys. Houses still standing. She followed the path until she reached another small village. The people looked weary but alive. They eyed her suspiciously, a thin girl covered in mud, clutching a torn satchel. An old woman stepped forward. "Where are you from, child?" Elodie hesitated. "I don't know anymore." The woman nodded, not pressing further. She gave her a bowl of soup and a blanket. "You can rest in the shed behind my house. No one will bother you there." In the days that followed, Elodie helped where she could, fetching water, mending clothes, sweeping floors. The people never asked too much about her past. Everyone had lost someone. Everyone carried their own silence. But every night, when the village slept, she drew. She drew faces of those who helped her, the landscape scarred by war, the sky heavy and endless. She filled every page she had left, until her book was almost full. Then one evening, as the sun set red behind the hills, a group of men arrived at the village. They wore worn coats, not uniforms. One of them carried a flag stitched from scraps of cloth. "It's over," they said. "The fighting has ended. The soldiers are gone." The words didn't feel real at first. People came out of their homes slowly, blinking as if waking from a long sleep. Some cried, others simply stood in silence. Elodie sat by the well, her sketchbook on her lap. Gone. The word echoed in her mind. It didn't mean peace, not yet. It meant absence, of boots, of fear, of orders shouted through the night. Days turned into weeks. The village began to rebuild. Elodie helped paint signs, mend fences, plant seeds in the soil. Her hands, once trembling, grew steady again. But her sketchbook remained with her always, wrapped carefully in cloth, never far from reach. One afternoon, a man arrived on a bicycle carrying a bag of letters and papers. He stopped by the well and began reading names aloud, people searching for missing relatives, survivors looking for others. When he read the name Leah Martin, Elodie's head snapped up. That was her mother's name. She ran to him, her heart pounding. "That's my mother," she said. The man looked surprised. "Your mother? She left messages in 3 towns, asking for you. She said if anyone finds a girl named Elodie Martin, they must tell her she's waiting in Saint-Benoît, near the river." For a moment, Elodie couldn't speak. The air seemed to disappear from her lungs. Her mother was alive. She left the next morning, walking along the dirt road that led south. The journey took 2 days. Each mile brought a flood of memories, the fountain, the bakery, the smell of bread, the sound of laughter before the world changed. When she finally reached Saint-Benoît, she saw a woman standing near the bridge, her hair streaked with gray, her hands clutching a shawl. She turned as Elodie approached, and for a second neither moved. Then her mother ran forward, tears streaming down her face. They held each other for a long time. No words, no explanations. Just the warmth of 2 hearts that had survived the same storm. Later, as they sat by the riverbank, Elodie opened her sketchbook and showed her the pages, the faces, the villages, the people she had met, the woman with the scarf, the farmhouse, the orchard, even the soldier who once asked her to draw him. Her mother turned each page slowly, her fingers trembling. "You kept it all," she whispered. "I had to," Elodie said. "If I didn't draw it, it would disappear." Her mother smiled faintly through her tears. "Then you've given the world something it can't lose." They stayed in Saint Benoit through the spring. The war had ended, but the silence it left behind was heavy. Some nights, Elodie still woke to the sound of boots in her dreams. But when she opened her eyes, there were no soldiers, no shouting, only the soft murmur of the river. Word spread about the girl who drew the soldiers. Someone told a local teacher, who came to see her sketches. Then others came, travelers, historians, people collecting pieces of what the war had broken. They said her drawings were not just art, but memory. They asked to keep them, to preserve them. She refused at first. Those drawings were pieces of her life, too personal to give away. But then she remembered the woman's voice, "Keep drawing, the world will need to remember." So she agreed, on one condition: the drawings would stay together, never separated, never sold. They would belong to everyone, not just someone. Years later, long after the uniforms had vanished from the streets and the sound of marching boots had faded into history, a small exhibition opened in the capital. Its name was simple: The Girl Who Drew Soldiers. People came from far away to see it. They stood in silence before the sketches, their faces reflected in the glass. They saw not heroes or enemies, but people, faces of fear, kindness, loss, and love. Elodie stood quietly in the back, no longer a child, her hair tied back, her hands still stained faintly with charcoal. A young boy nearby tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing to one of the drawings. "Who was she?" he asked. His mother smiled softly. "Someone who remembered when others couldn't." Elodie looked at the drawing the boy pointed to. It was the fountain, the first one she had ever made, where everything began. She thought of her father, her mother, the woman in the scarf, the soldiers she had drawn, the man in the wool coat, the bridge, the rain, the orchard, the fire, the silence. She thought of all the faces that had passed through her life and into her pages. Then she stepped closer to the glass, her reflection merging with the image. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile. Because she understood now that drawing had never just been about survival. It had been about remembrance. About turning pain into something that could breathe again. And somewhere deep inside, she felt that every line she had drawn, every shadow, every tear, every memory, had built something stronger than fear. It had built truth. And truth, once drawn, never fades.